What's up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So you're probably wondering what I'm doing laying on the ground under here, but truth of the matter is the diff on the truggy, as you can see, has a leak. Well, fixing that would be pretty easy. I decided I'd rather upgrade it now than take it out on a rock when we're out in the desert. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to take myself, who quite frankly is not a welder. I'm a man with a welder, which is a big difference between a fabricator welder and a man with a welder. And there's a very fine line between the two. And today I'm going to show you guys what a man with a welder can do, not versus a fabricator, because we don't have one of those here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this kit right here I purchased, which is, looks like a 3/16 thick ring and plate, and we're going to go ahead and try to weld it up and get it installed on this here diff. Now I'll go ahead and save you guys the troubles of skip through the video, and I will just make it time lapse so it's quick and easy, so all of it's entertaining. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull this diff cover off, being that it needs to be done anyways. As you can see, we already have a leak here, and we'll inspect what's inside of this differential. When I bought this truggy, I was told that it had a full spool. Now if that's true, I don't know. But we'll find out. So stay tuned, enjoy, and let's get this diff apart. I guess it would be helpful to let you guys know what tools I'll be using, so let's go over that briefly. So as you've seen in my last video, we have the carbide scraper. That's going to come in handy again. 13mm socket on the Milwaukee 3/8 stubby, a couple cans of brake clean, and then a screwdriver. All right, so as you guys can see, I left that top bolt in. That's gonna go ahead and help the diff cover from falling, and it's gonna give me something to hold it up there while I pry off on the bottom. Now, if you've noticed, I've taken all the bolts out of this and nothing has come dripping out of it yet. Some of you can probably notice there is a ton of silicone on this. So whoever did this last just went with the straight silicone route, but I don't know. Is that what it calls for? I'll have to look it up. If it calls for a gasket, we'll get one. If it does call for silicone, then we'll go ahead and just silicone it again. So let's go ahead and get this thing popped off. All right, so we got it off, and this gear fluid's like molasses, but it does have a full spool, as the seller claimed, so that all looks good. For those of you that don't know what a full spool is, I grabbed one for reference to show you guys. This right here is your center section, and instead of having spider gears and all that mess, and you know, most guys just go ahead and weld them up anyways, you just take this big chunk of steel, bolt your ring gear to it, your axle slide into it, and you have a full spool. All right, now let's get this thing all cleaned up and then head over to the bench and weld up this new diff cover. All right, so with minimal effort and just a carbide scraper, you can see where we're at now. Super clean. but I want to go ahead and get all of these bolt holes cleaned out. So I'm not going to bore you guys with that. I'm going to go ahead and get my tap set, and I'm going to go ahead and clean all these threads out of this, and then I will come back so you guys are not bored with watching me clean out holes. All right, just to briefly touch on the next part of this, we're going to go ahead and take my snap-on thread set. We are going to grab a metric 818. There we go. It is a M8 1.25. And we'll go ahead and get it chucked up. We'll run it in and out of each hole, get it cleaned up, and then we'll move on to welding up this diff cover. All right, we had to plug in a light because it's starting to get dark out here, but let's just recap on what we've done so far. Is pull the cover, we've cleaned it up, chased all the threads, we've inspected, and it does have a spool in it. We're gonna go ahead and take the red Scotch-Brite wheel now, clean up the mating surface, and then move on to welding up the new diff cover. All right, guys, so here's what we're left with. We got the rear end all cleaned up. We prepped the surface, and now we are going to go ahead and weld up this new diff cover. See how it goes. All right, let's go over this kit and what they sent us so we can game plan what we're gonna do. So obviously we have call it a front cover, and we have the big ring flange. We have a fill hole and a bung plug for it, and new hardware. So I think the best plan of attack would be to start with this flange here, and if you get a good look at it, you can see where there is some slag and all that from the laser cutting. So we're going to face this side out. We don't want to have to deal with that on the inside, causing any kind of issues with sealing, although we will clean it up. Then we will go ahead and weld the faceplate on. We'll get it tacked up, make sure it's where it should be. And then this fitting goes in from the back, and that's going to be your fill hole. Now, remember, I'm not a welder. I'm not a fabricator. I'm a man with a welder. And that is the whole idea of this video, is to show anybody, if you want to get out there and build something, it's quite simple. You just have to dive in and do it. Being scared, you'll never get anywhere. It'll cost you a lot of money. So let's go over the setup, what we're going to use. I have a simple Hobart welder. I think this thing was 450 bucks. It does run gas. It is, so far, so good. I love this little thing. It's cheaper than a Harbor Freight welder. Hobart is Miller, so this is a Miller welder, or a Hobart welder. I guess let's just get into it and see how it turns out. Remember, I'm not a welder. I'm just a guy like you who happens to have a welder, and I'm just going to dive in and see what I can do. So let's go ahead and time lapse this, and I'll jump back in a couple, and we'll go over any problems I'm having, if it's going smooth. Yeah, let's have at it. All right, so I'm going to be the first one to admit I had to go watch a couple YouTube videos to make sure I'm doing this correct. But what we're going to start with is prepping all the edges. So I'm going to go ahead and take this Scotch-Brite, and I'm going to go ahead and clean up all the edges here, and then we'll fit it up, we'll tack it into place, and then we'll begin to weld all the seams up. All right, so I went ahead and grabbed an old Hilti flap disc. I don't know what grit this is, but I looked for the most worn out one I had because I do not want to dig into this metal. But as you can see, what we're trying to take off is that metal flashing right there, that slag from the laser. So let's go ahead and get this cleaned up. I do not like what that's doing to the metal, so let's try a different flap disc. All right, round 2 with SATA. SATC, actually. I don't know what it is. It says it's a 60 grit, but it's pretty worn out. So let's try to get this cleaned up. You can see that last wheel kind of, yeah, I didn't like that at all. So let's try again. All right, here's what we're left with. We got all that flashing off them bolt holes. I can actually see a couple that I missed, so I'm gonna retouch really quick. Right there, and right there. We do want these bolts to seat perfectly flat, and we're gonna go ahead and leave the back side of this as it came. I think this is the flattest side, so that's what's gonna made up to the differential. So let's go ahead and fix up those couple little holes. I won't bore you with it, and then we'll move on to welding. All right, upon cleaning this up, I found these little guys here. So we're gonna go ahead and address those. I think those there might mess up my welding, so let's get this all prepped and laid flat on this flange and then start welding. All right, so I went around this thing and measured it the best I could all the way around. And by measured, I mean I stared at it and it looks good. So we're gonna go ahead and get a couple tacks on this, and then we'll take it over the truck and make sure that it does bolt on. There's no interference with the ring gear, and then we will finish welding it out. All right, I got a couple tacks on it. Like I said, I'm not a welder. I'm just a guy with a welder. So if you guys plan on doing this, just learn from my mistakes. Because if I can do it, anybody can do it. So let's go see if this fits on the truck. And there it is. All right, so I've decided, since I am not a professional welder, what I'm going to go ahead and do is weld up these seams from the inside before I weld them on the outside. Therefore, we're going to eliminate the possibility of leaks, at least as best as we can. And if I were a confident welder, then I would go ahead and just weld the outside. But let's go ahead and get this thing burned in. All right, here's what it looks like on the inside welds. They're not terrible, but it looks like I got a little bit better as I moved on. That was the first side, and that was the second side. But like I said, I'm not a fabricator. I don't claim to be a welder. I'm just a guy with a welder. All right, here's the outside after I just welded on the inside. All right, so this is what I wound up with. not too bad. No guarantees on it not leaking, but not bad for just a guy with a welder. So let me finish burning this in and decide if I want to burn in the inside, and then we'll get this fill plug put in and clean her up, put her on the truck. All right, here's a little update on the weld progress. Actually starting to get pretty good at this, but the rest of my welds tell the real story here, that I am just a guy that has a welder, not to be confused with a fabricator. All right, so we got it all welded up. The diff cover's ready to go. We're gonna go ahead and get it painted. I'm gonna show you guys how it turned out. Let me know in the comments what you think. Let me know if you'd have spent the extra $100 to buy it already welded, or if you had a welder, if you would just go ahead and do what I did and do a mediocre weld job. Like I said, I'm not a welder. I'm a man with a welder. All right, my welder is just a tool. I'm not a fabricator. I've never claimed to be a fabricator. What people don't understand is when you have a welder and you claim to be a fabricator and you do jobs that say welding on a trailer or welding on an automobile, and you're putting someone's life at risk. So don't ever claim to be a fabricator if you're not a fabricator, okay? It takes a lot of practice, it takes a lot of time, and quite frankly, I'm not a fabricator. I'm just a guy who has a welder and I use it as a tool. So I'm gonna show you what I was able to accomplish with just a welder and myself. So here's what we got. This is the diff cover. I wanna say that's like my best weld I've ever done there. But remember, I am not a fabricator. I used my tool and I welded this diff cover up. I think it turned out great. I think saving $100 was well worth it to do it yourself. I encourage you to go out and get a welder if you don't have one. Use it as a tool. If you want to become a professional welder, there's money in that business. But for me, it's not for me. I've had a welder for a little bit of time now. I've done a little bit of welding here and there. But I want to say that's honestly probably my best weld I've ever done right there. All right, guys, I got the diff cover painted. I'll show you that here in a minute. But we're going to go ahead and end this one off here. We have a lot coming up. We're going to go ahead and get the NASCAR out in the next couple days, so stay tuned for that video. We're going to get this car cleaned up, and we're going to game plan on it. We're going to make a list. We're going to execute it. For now, this diff cover is done. I'll show you what it looks like. I'll get it put back on the car, and on the next video, I'll show you guys how it all turned out. Tomorrow, we have a long drive to California. We're going to visit the guys at Tech Fuel Injection. I'll show you guys what they have to offer over there, and we'll talk about some cool giveaways we're going to do on the channel. But like I said, for now, we're going to end it here. Thanks for following along. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, like and subscribe. It really helps out. And also, I try to do time lapse on these videos to make it where you don't have to skip through and be bored to death just watching me, ramble on. So without further ado, here's the diff cover. Here's how it turned out. I did shoot it with the coat of satin black. I'm not really a fan of gloss black, and flat black just looks like trash. So there it is, that's how it turned out. And if you would, like, subscribe, it'll really help out the channel. It'll really help support me in putting out new videos. So, until next time.